In 1944, the most famous orchestra conductor in the world sent a telegram to Brazil. The conductor was Leopold Stokowski, the man who shook hands with Mickey Mouse in Walt Disney's Fantasia 4 years earlier. The man who had reinvented orchestral conducting for the modern era. The telegram was an invitation. It said, in essence, come to America. Come conduct your own music in Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and New York. Come to my country. We need to hear what you have done. The telegram was addressed to Heitor Villa-Lobos. He was 57 years old. He had spent the previous 15 years writing a sequence of 9 compositions called Bachianas, Brasileiras. These pieces did something nobody in classical music had ever attempted at full scale. They took Johann Sebastian Bach, the German composer who had written the most refined counterpoint in Western musical history, and rebuilt his methods using the rhythms of Brazilian choro, the harmonies of folk songs from the Northeast, the melodic shapes of Amazonian indigenous music, and the syncopation of samba. Villa-Lobos walked into the most sacred chamber of European classical music, and he walked out with the keys. This is the story of a Brazilian composer who wrote more than 1,000 pieces of music in his lifetime, befriended Igor Stravinsky in Paris in the 1920s, taught singing to millions of Brazilian schoolchildren during the Vargas dictatorship, and ended his life as one of the most performed classical composers of the 20th century, and whose name, outside of the classical music world, almost nobody knows. Heitor Villa-Lobos was born in Rio de Janeiro on March 5, 1887. His father, Raul, was a librarian at the National Library and an amateur musician. By the time Heitor was a teenager, he was already playing cello, guitar, and clarinet. By his 20s, he was wandering through Rio's bohemian music scene, jamming with the choro musicians who hung out in the late-night boteco bars, absorbing the popular music of his city alongside the European classical tradition his father had taught him. In his 20s, he claimed to have made multiple expeditions deep into Brazil, into the Amazon, into the Northeast, into the indigenous interior, to collect folk songs and rhythms. Some of these expeditions are documented, others are murky. Villa-Lobos was a brilliant fabulist who told different versions of his own life depending on the audience. What is undisputed is that by the time he was 30, he had absorbed an enormous amount of Brazilian musical material, popular, folk, indigenous, regional, and he was looking for a way to integrate it into something European audiences would recognize as serious composition. Before we go further, Brazilian music is one of the most underexplored scenes in the world, from samba to bossa nova to baile funk. If that kind of discovery sounds like your kind of channel, hit subscribe. You won't regret it. In 1923, Villa-Lobos arrived in Paris. He was 36 years old, completely unknown in Europe, and carrying a suitcase full of his own scores. Paris in 1923 was the global capital of artistic experimentation. Stravinsky was there, Picasso was there. Diaghilev's Ballet Russe had reinvented modern dance. The Brazilian poet Manuel Bandeira and the patron Carlos Ginley had connected Villa-Lobos to the right circles. He met Stravinsky. He played his scores for the leading French composers. He shocked them. Nobody in Paris had heard music that fused this kind of Brazilian melodic and rhythmic material with European modernist harmony. Between 1923 and 1930, Villa-Lobos lived primarily in Paris and toured Europe relentlessly. He composed his Choros series, 14 massive pieces, each one a different attempt to fuse Brazilian popular music with classical structure. The Choros were unlike anything that had come before. They were not arrangements of folk songs. They were not orchestrations of samba. They were original compositions in which the entire architectural logic was Brazilian, even when the technical apparatus was European. He returned to Brazil at the end of 1930 and walked directly into the most consequential phase of his career. That same year, the politician Getúlio Vargas seized power in Brazil through a coup. Vargas would govern Brazil in one form or another for most of the next 2 decades. His regime, increasingly authoritarian, was committed to building Brazilian national identity through every cultural institution available. Music was central to that project. Vargas needed a national composer. Villa-Lobos needed a patron. They found each other. Villa-Lobos was given control of music education in Brazilian public schools. He invented something called the Sistema de Canto Orfeônico, a national program that taught singing, harmony, and musical literacy to millions of Brazilian children through massive coordinated choral performances. He composed simplified pieces for these performances. He conducted choirs of 40,000 children at a time in Rio's stadiums. The political project of Vargas, building a unified Brazilian cultural identity from above, gave Villa-Lobos a level of resources and reach no Brazilian composer had ever had before. And during those same years, he wrote the Bachianas Brasileiras. The Bachianas, there are 9 of them, composed between 1930 and 1945, are Villa-Lobos's masterpiece. The premise was simple and audacious. He would write Brazilian music in the style of Bach. Each piece would have movements with names taken directly from Baroque practice: prelude, aria, toccata, fugue. But each piece would also have movements with names from Brazilian musical practice: embolada, modinha, cantiga. Bach's counterpoint would meet Brazilian rhythm. The German fugue would meet the Brazilian choro. Bachianas Brasileiras No. 5, the most famous of the 9, is scored for soprano and 8 cellos. The aria is now one of the most beloved pieces of 20th century music, a wordless vocalese that floats over a slow, descending bass line. Listen to it once and you understand immediately what Villa-Lobos was doing. The harmony is Bach. The melodic shape is Brazilian. The result is something that belongs to neither tradition fully and to both completely. Pablo Casals, the greatest cellist of the era, became one of Villa-Lobos's strongest advocates and conducted the Bachianas around the world. In 1944, the work caught Stokowski's attention. Stokowski was already one of the most powerful classical music figures in America, and he was on a personal mission to bring Latin American composers, Villa-Lobos especially, to American audiences. He arranged the invitation. Villa-Lobos came to the United States. He conducted programs of his own works with major American orchestras in Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and New York that fall and winter. American critics, who had previously known him only by reputation, encountered the music live and in full force. He came back to America repeatedly over the next 15 years. He conducted at festivals. He gave lectures. He composed commissioned works for American performers, including a guitar concerto written in 1951 for Andrés Segovia, the Spanish guitarist who had nearly single-handedly raised the classical guitar to concert status. Villa-Lobos became an international fixture in serious classical programming. Back in Brazil, his stature was now untouchable. The Vargas era ended in 1945, but his cultural authority did not. He continued composing at extraordinary speed: symphonies, concertos, chamber works, choral works, opera, ballet, film scores. The estimate of his total output ranges from 1,000 to 2,000 pieces. The exact number is impossible to settle because he composed continuously, and many works exist in multiple versions. He was prolific in a way that almost no 20th century composer matched. His personal life was complicated. He married the pianist Lucília Guimarães in 1913. She had been one of his early collaborators and a serious musician in her own right. They were the public face of Brazilian music for 2 decades. In the 1930s, the marriage broke down. Villa-Lobos began a long relationship with Arminda Neves de Almeida, a younger woman who would remain with him until his death, and who became the curator of his archive and his legacy. Villa-Lobos was diagnosed with bladder cancer in the 1940s. He continued composing through declining health for the rest of his life. He conducted his own works almost until the end. On November 17, 1959, he died in Rio de Janeiro. He was 72 years old. The state organized a national funeral. Brazil understood in 1959 that one of its greatest cultural figures had died. The international classical music world understood in 1959 that one of the most important composers of the 20th century had died. The two understandings have not always lived together comfortably. Villa-Lobos became a name carried mostly by classical music programs and academic study, while the broader cultural conversation in Brazil, and certainly outside it, moved on to bossa nova, tropicalia, samba in its modern forms. But the music has not gone anywhere. Bachianas Brasileiras No. 5 is recorded constantly. Singers from Joan Baez to Renee Fleming have interpreted the wordless aria. Cellists train on it. Orchestras program the Bachianas regularly. The choros are now considered as essential as anything in 20th century Brazilian music. The guitar concerto is in the standard repertoire. Villa-Lobos's most ambitious experiment, putting Bach in dialogue with the Amazon and the Brazilian backlands, turned out to be one of the most generative musical ideas of the 20th century. He stole Bach for Brazil, and he gave Brazilian music something European composers had spent 200 years building. The trade was good for both sides. If you want to hear what classical music sounds like when it grows out of a forest instead of a court, start with Bachianas Brasileiras No. 5. Listen to the soprano, listen to the cellos, then listen to one of the choros. Then come back and listen to it all again, knowing that one Brazilian put it there, by himself, against the entire weight of a tradition that had no idea he was coming. Subscribe if you want more of these stories. I find them so that you don't have to.